All right, hello AP seminar. So we are going to talk about APA citation today. So I'm going to go through some of a PowerPoint with you that you have shared in your classroom. But I'm not going to go through every part of it just because it is pretty lengthy. And I just need to go over the key parts with you all, and you can look at the rest yourself. It'll make sense here in a second. So let me share my screen so you can see what I'm talking about. So everything's going to be in the APA citation folder that you see here. Right now, this is not your period, so it's going to be moved in there, so you'll see it there as well. The first thing is a PDF version of the PowerPoint, so you can use that in case you can't access the one that I have embedded in Schoology. It's the exact same thing. There's no differences involved. So let's just walk through some of the key parts of APA. By the way, this all came from Purdue OWL. Highly recommend if you're ever in doubt about a formatting or citation, you use APA, or you use Purdue OWL. That's what I was trying to say, in order to help you, because honestly, it's one of the greatest resources I've found when looking at any type of citation, and that includes MLA, APA, and any other type of citation that you'll encounter. So while this is loading, just a little bit of background. The reason why we teach APA citation and AP seminar is because it's probably one of the most common citation styles that you'll use in the future. Selfishly, and I say this with a grain of salt because I am an English teacher, but selfishly, English teachers usually teach MLA because that is the citation style that you use for English. However, most other things that you will do that require citation will be in APA. Most college professors require it. Most disciplines that do research use APA citation. So I usually teach APA citation because it's going to be what you'll use more likely next year in AP research and in the future. I also do it because I recognize that most English teachers teach MLA, so having two citation styles under your belt is pretty helpful. So in this PowerPoint, I will say I have taken a couple things out that were not relevant to our course. So if you are ever in need of looking at the full details of APA citation for whatever reason, there is a full manual. It's published. We use the 7th edition. There is a 6th edition. The 7th is the most updated, and it has a couple different nuances. So I usually stick to 7. But whatever you do, the rule in AP seminar is as long as you do the same citation consistently, then you are going to get the points in the rubric row that require you to cite evidence. So we're going to use APA citation because I also find it to be easier in my brain, and hopefully in yours as well. But it's also one that I think is the most beneficial to you. So the first thing, and this is really more related to when you're doing your own research, is when you're speaking about your research, you're speaking in the first person. So you're using we, you're using our team, that style of talking, as opposed to the third person, like the authors went out and pursued this. This is not a lot for you right now in AP seminar because you're not really conducting your own research. You're doing what we call lowercase r research, where you're just kind of getting information from others and bringing it together. So this is not something you're going to have to worry about. You're still more than likely going to be using the authors because you're actually going to be talking about authors. You're not going to be talking about yourself because you're not the primary researcher. So we're going to skip through a few of these slides because, again, they are much more related to actual research. And that's capital R research. So the language in APA, 3 things. They should be clear, concise, and plain. So we don't want to use crazy academic language, or not academic language. We should use academic language, but we don't want to use crazy subject-specific language. We want to make sure that an audience, a large audience, can understand us. We want to make sure that we're not being too wordy. We do have word counts that we have to hit, but there's no reason for us to be adding in superfluous words, to use a nice big word, along with our presentation. So be clear, be concise, and be plain. Just that simple. So we're going to skip through a couple of these because this is not relevant to you all right now, and move on to this. So citation is not just how you recognize an author's recognize an author that you've used their information. It's also how you format your paper. And so we use APA to its fullest extent in that we will also format our paper in the APA style as well. So the first thing is it's typed, right? Simple, easy. Second is that it's double spaced, which hopefully you're used to at this point. It has 1-inch margins. That's the standard. So if you haven't adjusted your margins on your word processors, chances are it's already set for a 1-inch. 10 to 12 point font. I usually stick to 11 or 12. I don't tend to go to 10, but you do have that range to utilize. And it's supposed to be a font that is a standard font. So a Times New Roman, an Arial, a Courier. Those are 3 that I stick to. Comic Sans is never acceptable, only because it's just as silly. So don't use Comic Sans. But those 3 tend to be the ones that are the best, most formal for writing. And then it's printed on standardized size paper, which you all won't have to worry about because yours is submitted virtually. So a couple of different things. There is 2 different ways you format a paper. One is for a professional paper and the other is for a student. We're going to, for the most part, stick to a student paper with the exception of the running header. So I do ask my students to provide a running header throughout their papers for a number of reasons. One, it helps me if I print out your papers to look at them and to annotate on them. In case I drop them, I know exactly which paper belongs to which and in what order because the page number is there. So that helps me in that regard. The other reason is because when you submit your paperwork, it will go to College Board and they have an online system for grading, which is great, but we do know that sometimes technology can be weird. So if we have a running header, you add an extra level of backup in case something happened and your paper got merged with someone else's. The running header will be a good indicator to the reader that something's weird in the paper and they can flag it as opposed to just grading it and thinking you did some weird research paper altogether. So there's a number of reasons. It also is, it's starting to get yourself into that professional mindset, which I think is helpful. So that's why we do the running header. So in the running header, you'll just have your title in all capital, not bold, not italicized, not underlined. It's just the title of your paper in the left of the adjusted to the left, all capital. And then on the far right, you'll have your page numbers. So here is a reference for you. Actually, this you don't have to worry about. This is when you do professional papers. So we're going to skip through that as well. So this is what your cover page will look like for your professional papers, for the papers that you'll submit to College Board and the papers we'll do going forward, with the one exception, again, of the running header. So just keep that in mind anytime the running headers should be there, even though we're doing the student paper. So on your cover page, you have a few things. One is going to be your title of your paper, and on the title page, it does get bolded. It's not all caps, it's capital where it's supposed to be capital. So capitalizing proper pronouns, capitalizing important words, and then leaving lowercase the unimportant words. That's a weird term to use, but the words that don't require the capitalization, like for and the and those types of things, so long as they're not the first word of the sentence. The next few lines, so you'll skip a line. The next few lines are going to be weird only when you're submitting to College Board, because in a traditional paper, you will have a few things. One, you'll have your name or yours and your group's name. For you all, you'll only be writing a paper for yourself, so you won't have to worry about group members. Then you will have the institution, so it would be your school would go underneath that. Below that would be the course. Below that would be your teacher or professor, and then the date in which you wrote the paper. We don't do all of that for College Board for a few reasons. One, nothing you submit to College Board will ever have your name on it. That's to keep you anonymous to avoid any bias in grading your paper. You will also not have anything identifying you within your paper. So you can't name your school in the paper. You can't name your professor or your teacher in the paper. So my name won't go on it and your school won't go on it as well. So on your College Board papers, you're going to have many less lines. You're going to have your title. You'll then have AP research and the date, and that's going to be it. That's all you'll put on your title page, because again, we can't have identifiers because they want to avoid any bias in the reading process. In case a teacher looks at a paper and sees that it came from a school that is known to have really great scores and the paper doesn't meet what their highest expectation is, and so they lower the score, they just want to avoid anything that might create that kind of bias. So your name doesn't go on it for College Board. When you're submitting things to professors and things, however, you will put all of those in there. So keep this for your reference for future courses, but just know for the purpose of our class, we're not going to have the identifiable stuff. And then, like I said, we're going to use the professional paper only to look at the running header. That will go on the top, including the cover page. I know some format styles don't have the page numbers start on the cover page, the title page. APA does. So your running header will go there as well. Don't worry about these author notes. Again, you're only doing the professional paper to look at the running header. Everything else will be formatted like a student paper. All right, moving right along here. Don't have to worry about an abstract yet. That's next year. So your next page will be number 2, and that's where you're going to start your essay. At the top, center bolded, you'll put the full title of your paper again. So you'll have the title of your paper on the title page, and then you'll have the title of your paper again on the first page that you start writing your full research paper or essay. Double spaced, we don't have to worry about tables and things for this course, so we're going to move on. And then the last formatted area is going to be your reference page. We don't call it Works Cited, we don't call it bibliography, you will call it references, and it is similar to MLA. You do have a hanging indent, so the first sentence, the first line rather, will be all the way to the left, and then you will have the ½ indent for all of the preceding lines of that one reference. And then the next one will start again, left adjusted, ½ indent for all other lines. You will label that one with the references bolded and centered, and then you'll do your citations as you'll learn here in the next few slides. And you'll list them in alphabetical order. So alphabetical based on whatever the first word is. So if it's the title of the work because you don't have an author, then you go by that. Or if it's the author's last name, you'll go by that. All right, so here's something that's different from in APA than MLA. It's your author's name. You don't put the author's full first name. Instead, you do the author's initials. So you do last name first, followed by the initials. And then similar to MLA, you have last name first. So that should always be how you format it. So the last name is the first thing you see, but then you don't put the full last name, you'll just put the initials. Now, most works will have the author's first name, middle initial, and then last name. So you'll put the first initial, middle initial after the last name. Capitalize only the first letter of the titles and subtitles, or anything after a colon or a dash. You don't have to capitalize the first letter of the second word in a hyphenated compound word. So if you're if it's a place where you have to capitalize and it's a hyphenated compound word, you only capitalize the first letter. You don't capitalize the second half of the word. That was very complicated. I don't think you'll run into that, but come back to this slide if you need it. All right, so let's look at, I'm going to skip through a couple of these because, again, I don't need to go over everything. I just want to go over the biggest parts. So in-text citations, there's a number of slides related to this. I'm going to go over the basics of it, and then you can see the different nuances that come from different types of works. But the main thing is that when you are giving a parenthetical, that you don't introduce the author in. So let's just say you speak about what the research is, and then you at the end put your parentheses, your citation, then you will put the author's last name in the parentheses, followed by a comma, space, the year the work was published, end parentheses, and then period. It's different from MLA in that you have the comma separating your author and your year. Some MLA doesn't require the year, APA does. But what makes it even more different is when you introduce the author before you talk about what they said. So let's say I said, Atkins suggests, like they put there, because I've already said the author's name, I don't need to restate the author's name in the parenthetical. It's duplicating your work. So instead, you put the author's name as part of the sentence like you did, and then after you say the author's name, you will then put the parenthetical with just the year right after their name. So I say Atkins suggests that Purdue OWL is a good resource for students. So you can see that after the author's name goes the year that the publication happened. Let's see it again with page numbers because it looks similar but a little bit different. So when you have a page number, same format as before. If you don't introduce the author's name, you simply put it in your parenthetical like you're used to with MLA. When you do have a page number, that gets added to the parenthetical. So just like before, we have author's last name, Adkins, comma, space, 2018, comma, space, and now we put P period space and the page number, close parentheses, period at the end. Always period at the end, by the way. So you add page numbers if you have them. If you don't have page numbers, you do what they did before, and you just simply have last name, comma, year, close parentheses. If you are introducing the author in your sentence, which you more than likely will be, because again, you're going to offer credibility. So you're going to probably mention the author's name. So you're going to do most of your citations like the second one, where you'll say Adkins, the year of publication. You'll then talk about what was in their publication, whatever you referenced. When you're done talking about that section, you then end it with the page number that you found it on. So you close out the information you got from the author with the page number. Again, if you don't have a page number, you can't do that because you have nothing to put there, so you wouldn't have anything at the end. But if you have a page number, it becomes that end note that shows us that we're done looking at that section of the author's work. All right, so let's see. This one is a quote and very similar to parenthetical, so I don't think I have to go detailed into this one because it's almost the same thing with the exception of instead of you summarizing what the author said, you instead are quoting them directly. Same rules as before with quotation marks, right? Comma, open quote, say exactly what the author states. You close your quotes, and then you do your parentheses the same way. Last name of author, comma, year, comma, page number if it's there, close parentheses, period at the end always. The only time you will have punctuation within your quotation marks is if you are exclaiming or if the author exclaimed or had a question. Everything else will always have the period at the end. So keep that in mind. You'll never have punctuation inside of the quotation mark. It'll always be outside of the parentheses to end the sentence, unless it is an exclamation that you're quoting or a question that you're quoting. In that case, it goes inside the quotation mark because you don't want the reader of your research paper to think you're asking them a question or exclaiming something. You were just simply quoting a question or exclamation from the author. And then again, same thing for quotes with when you introduce the author, which you will more than likely do. Again, after you state the author's name, you give the year the publication was issued. You'll then go into your quotes like you know how to do, and then end it with the page number if it's there. If it's not there, you just simply end your quotation with your period after the quotation marks. All right, so that is all I want to go over for the in-text citation. Some of this stuff is going to be more advanced and what you'll use in AP research, not necessarily AP seminar. Oh, this is important. So when there are multiple authors, which you're going to find in some of your research paper, if there's just two, you will simply state their both of their last names with the and symbol between the two of them. If you state their names within the work itself, you should use the word and, not the symbol. So the symbol goes inside parentheses or in your reference page. The word itself always goes in the actual sentence if you state their names in a sentence. So you can see, according to scientists DePreti and McPherson, using and, then they put them, instead of saying their names, they just introduce their quote and they put them in the parentheses with the and symbol. So with two authors, you just have to put and between them, and it's the word if it's in your work, or if it's the symbol if it's in your parentheses or reference page. If there are more than two authors, so 3, 4, 5, 7, however many, you list the first author's last name, and then you follow it with et al, et space al. It means it's Latin for and others, and that's simply to show that it's not just one person, but it's one person and a team. So same formatting as you have before. If you introduce the author before you state your sentence, within your sentence rather, you say Lynn et al, give the year, and then talk about what they say. If you don't say them before in your sentence, you just give their information, you then put them in parentheses with Lynn et al, comma, year, and parentheses. Notice that the period for all comes at, or the period for it comes after all. Et is a full word, all is not, and so that gets the abbreviation. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to go over for in-text citation. If it doesn't have an author, you do the title of the work. So if you don't have an author, which some of you may encounter, make sure it's a credible source, because oftentimes when we don't have an author, it makes it hard for us to see that they're credible. So double check that first. But if you don't, you then just use the title of the work, and if it's and then in your parentheses, you just use the first word instead of the full title, because you don't need to add the full title there. The parentheses, by the way, are just a way for us to find that in your reference page, and so your reader can see where the sources came from. Okay, that's all for that part. I'm not going to get super nitty-gritty on the next part either. Let me just see. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to give you all some extra information, an extra slideshow rather. You'll find it in your saying a lot. I need to stop saying so much. Just as I don't want you all saying I should stop saying So I'm going to also add into your folder, the APA folder, a PowerPoint presentation that gives you the citation for the reference page, the frames for any type of different citation, books, references, songs, movies, whatever they are. I'll have that there for you as a format. The good part about AP seminars that you don't have to necessarily memorize, because you can always use your notes to reference since you're submitting things later. But it's good information to keep in your mind. You want to make sure you know at least the basics, like what comes first, author's always first, or title if there's no author, just those little things, so you can recognize if mistakes happen. You can also utilize citation machines. Just be careful and cautious, because sometimes they do make mistakes because they don't always have all the information or can't access the information you can. So just make sure you're well enough that you can find those out. So what you will do now is I'm going to give you some tasks, a task card activity that you're going to complete. It's going to have you practicing finding mistakes in citations as well as creating citations. Before you get that going, though, just one last note, and it's a note that I picked up on one of my students who were working on the same task. There are two ways to give information in your essay. You can paraphrase or you can direct quote. So you can either create a paraphrase or a direct quote. No matter which you choose, you will always provide in-text citation. The in-text citation is the parentheses with the information. Direct quotes and paraphrases are the what you bring in. The in-text citation is the at the end of it. Okay, so keep that in mind. You're going to see that where they're going to say create a direct quote and in-text citation. They're not asking you to create a direct quote and a paraphrase. They're asking you for a direct quote with the parentheses at the end. So just be cautious of that and know that that's what they're going to word it as. So go into the folder and get started. It will more than likely take us a few class periods for this. So I anticipate it taking at minimum of 2, just because there are a lot. There's 32 different ones, and I want you guys to do all of them. So go ahead and get started on those. If you have any questions, I'll put the questions, comments, and concerns discussion in there for you, and I will get to them as quickly as I can. And then I will see you all at our next live. Have fun.